In 1973, one of the top remote viewers, Ingo Swann, said, "I see very thin rings around Jupiter." In 1979, that's like 6 years later, Voyager went by and said, "Oh my goodness, there's rings around Jupiter."
For 20 years, the government spent $20 million with the best mathematicians and physicists to show that certain individuals could penetrate different dimensions, acquire information, come back through the power of higher consciousness without use of technology.
We believe everybody has the ability to remote view. We really don't have the limitations we think we have. You could sit here, whether you're in California or Florida, it didn't matter, and you could see something that was going on in France. Consciousness does not originate in your head or my head, but it originates in the cosmos.
This has been the second most important breakthrough in the 20th century. We are multidimensional. We're not limited to the physical body. We're part of a cosmic intelligence.
Well, hello, Doctors JJ and Desiree Hurtak. Welcome to the TCCHE podcast.
It's great to be here. It's fabulous because TCCHE, we've been there since almost the very beginning because it's about consciousness, and that's what we represent.
In fact, the theme this time is consciousness in the human evolution. So it's a much larger picture of information and excitement that brings us together.
And in terms of your wonderful work, for people possibly who are listening to this podcast for the first time, they haven't yet come across you, how would you sum up what you do and your work?
Well, technically, we're futurists. We look towards a positive future by bringing together all the other areas of knowledge. So we've been trained as social scientists, linguists, psychologists, even remote sensing, which is the use of radar to look at different archaeological dimensions. In essence, we bring together the holistic view of the purpose of life.
Right. We really believe that consciousness does not originate in your head or his head or my head, but it originates in the consciousness of the cosmos, and that we are reaching into that cosmos to get information. So if we're really negative all the time, we're going to be picking up on those negative thoughts. If we're positive or seeking, we can develop into greater and greater levels of awareness. And so that's really the essence of our teachings. Dr. Hurtak had a unique experience that showed him this as well, and showed him that we really don't have the limitations we think we have.
And you said about the unique experience, one of the things that it often, not for everyone, but oftentimes there's that dark night of the soul, those crucible moments that show you something, that wake you up. It sounds like you have. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what were one of those or the events that woke you up, that brought this to consciousness.
I was a young professor teaching at the State University in California, and I had a lot of students interested in Eastern psychology and philosophy who wanted to know about the existence of the avatars, or what we will call in the Abrahamic traditions of the Middle East, the angels and archangels, beings of superior talent. And I frankly couldn't give them any substantial answer, although I had studied intellectually these great traditions. And so I began to combine what I call certain forms of mantra or sound energy. Sanskrit, Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, Coptic. I put together really a combination of these sounds, and I created what I would call a morphogenic field of energy of how sound creates an energy door or dimension opening. In that process, my consciousness was suddenly taken into another dimension. I realized, as my wife Desiree just said, there are no limits to what consciousness is, because we are basically multidimensional human beings waking up in a vast and awesome universe. It was at that point that I experienced master teachers of higher light, and I realized that we're all interconnected. And this, of course, opened the door for our work, which spans now some 50 years, 33 countries, more than 25 languages. Yes, we're all connected in a very special way.
And Desiree, was there one of those moments for you?
Well, I had a background in this. I grew up, we're sitting here in Florida right now recording this, and I grew up in Florida. And with the Bermuda Triangle, with other experiences that I personally had as a younger person, when Dr. Hurtak had his unique experience, I was one of the few people that understood it. We're talking back in the early 70s. And so, yes, I mean, it was more like, it came together to really not only enlighten me, but also to give me the strength to move forward and understand that we need to get this information out to humanity. One, that we're not alone. Two, that there are special relationships we have with the cosmos that we've been dumbed down, and we're trying to open the door to higher consciousness. So we realized we can remote view. And then we connected with people at Stanford Research Institute, which was going on simultaneously in the early 70s. And we were able to understand that you could remote view. You could sit here, whether you're in California or Florida, it didn't matter, and you could see something that was going on in France. I often say you could see where your boyfriend is and what he's doing on a Friday night when he's not with you. So these are the kind of things that remote viewing allows you to do. And how? Why? Well, we were answering those questions.
That's absolutely, I love this. And one of the things I'm noticing at the time we're recording this is we are seeing a lot more government information coming out about the fact, nudging towards the fact that we're not alone. People say we haven't had that information because we actually can't handle it as human beings. It will be too scary. And our first thought is to go to war. So in terms of we are not alone, are we truly getting to the point where we're going to start having more concrete evidence of that? Or do you think it's going to remain hidden and we'll just get those little snippets coming out every now and again?
Well, it's really, someone called it, Lou Elizondo called it a marathon, not a sprint. So it's going to take a while, but, more and more the government is starting to understand and wake up, because the thing is, so many people and so many pilots and so many other we'll say advanced people, even in government, have had certain experiences. Really, to be honest, Ronald Reagan, when he was governor, saw something when he was flying in an airplane. He saw what we would call today a UFO, and what the government's calling UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. And he got to a party of associate in Los Angeles, and he started talking about it. And Shirley MacLaine was there, and she was going, "Yeah, I know what you're talking about. This is great." Other people were going, "That's really weird. What did you see?" So there was still this dichotomy, and unfortunately, it still exists. But more and more people, more and more government leaders are starting to understand, there's trillions and trillions and trillions of stars out there, and we can't be the only ones. So, let's wake up to that reality. And it's only a matter of really solidifying, who saw what, when, and where that would be valid. And have they helped us in any way? So we don't want to get into that too much because we're talking about consciousness. But one of the interesting things regarding consciousness is they all seem to be able to know who we are. They're aware of what we're thinking, which is the same thing as kind of remote viewing. We can tap into other things. Have you heard about the telepathy tapes? An amazing phenomena that kids that are autistic have that ability. So this is what we're talking about. Consciousness is so much more than how we're using it. We just need to awaken to that fact.
And our book, The Keys of Enoch, put out in 1973, illustrate this. This book was illustrated by a very gifted artist from the Netherlands who worked with John Lennon. Her name was Marika Postuma. You can see one of her pictures here of how humanity is sitting on a black cube pondering the nature of life, whereas humanity that is liberated has a multicolor vibration, which means we're working with the full energy spectrum of knowledge. And so the Keys of Enoch bring together the scientific and the spiritual side, the separation that has caused much suffering, tragedy down through the centuries. So, put another way, the left side of the brain, which is the analytical, the right side, which is the metaphysical and spiritual, come together in this teaching.
And you say she created that image in 1973?
I gave her the outline of the images I wanted for this book. Now, this book, of course, is on the level of a spiritual philosophy and psychology. This book, Mind Dynamics from Stanford Research Institute, is the government science. We call it the real X-Files of how for 20 years, the government spent $20 million with the best mathematicians and physicists to show that certain individuals could penetrate different dimensions, acquire information, come back through the power of higher consciousness without use of technology. In essence, this is important because it shows that there's no longer a need to argue whether this power exists. We have this higher perceptual spiritual energy if we want to use it. That's up to us.
One example, which we show at many of the TCCHE conferences, is that of Ingo Swann. You can find this on the internet. In 1973, one of the top remote viewers, Ingo Swann, said, "I'm going to remote view Jupiter." And he says, I see very thin, but they exist, rings around Jupiter. Now, his friend said, yeah, sure you're not looking at Saturn or something? He goes, no, I know what Saturn looks like. This is Jupiter. Well, no one really on the planet, as far as we're concerned, knew about rings around Jupiter. Sure enough, in 1979, that's like 6 years later, Voyager went by and said, oh my goodness, there's rings around Jupiter. So just to say, these are the things that you can see that we can get data on, and also where you left your keys. That's the other one.
And the other part of the story is in 1973, I had the experience of higher consciousness of seeing pyramids on Mars. And when NASA went to Mars with their probes and realized specifically there were mathematical geometries in certain locations, they said, wow, you were right on target. I said, may I have pictures to show my students? So I put those pictures in the Keys of Enoch. The first release, I think, of a major story that may come out in government disclosure in the next 2 years, that there was once previous life on our sister planet Mars that was destroyed when their atmosphere suddenly was destroyed by a comet. Who knows?
Fantastic. That is absolutely wonderful. And talking of remote viewing, the future, and the timescale between those two, there's a lot of turmoil as we sit here in the world. The light and the dark, the good and the evil, the Agenda 2030, all of these things. From your perspective as remote viewers, futurists, what do you see coming in the future in this battle with the, as Greg will put it, AI and consciousness? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have to say, we work very closely with a Zulu shaman, Credo Mutwa. We've done a film of him, and he said prophecy is God's early warning system, which means we have free will, so we can change anything that's taking place. And the more collectively we can work together, the more we can change. And that's really also where consciousness comes in, because we can tap into that collective consciousness. We can work to shift it. We've done a lot of prayers for peace, which is mentioned in our book, Mind Dynamics. We've done a lot of just, hurricane coming to Puerto Vallarta. We got people in Mexico, our friends together, like push it aside. It went aside. Now, whether we did it or not, I don't know, but we're kind of well known for some abilities like this. But it's not us individually, it's us collectively. So I think anything can shift. Now, with AI, it's more a matter of understanding our own greater potential and not put it all in the hands of AI. Some people say that AI will surpass us, but they don't have the consciousness connection that we have. We're talking about consciousness to see the, rings around Jupiter. I mean, is some AI ever going to know that if no one else knows that? They only know what other people know. We can know more. That's what's really cool about who we are.
So the bottom line is we must be as positive as possible. No matter what the situation is, go beyond the political narrative and realize we're part of a much greater process. I write about called The Keys of Enoch, stating that we are part of a higher evolution. We're part of a cosmic intelligence. It doesn't stop with Mother Earth. It goes on to other planetary systems, and that we tune in to a higher vision of life. Being positive as much as we can make it through these storms of political isms of one side versus the other that have defeated, that have disillusioned, disempowered young people. We need to energize hope, love, and compassion in young people. And this is the work of our future science.
Right. And so some of our work with young people is to get them to understand their own greater potential and that there's more to life than what's here in this three-dimensional reality. Yet you can't leave this reality, because if you do, you're going to end up in a worse situation than you are now, because there is a law of karma. So we're here now to find our mission in life, to find our cosmic and spiritual family on this planet, and to do the work that needs to be done. So if you feel, the planet needs to be saved in this way, I would not use violence in any way, but you can use consciousness. You can use advanced learning to help to transform. And we say this with AI as well. If you are concerned about AI, figure out how you can work with AI. We work with a good friend of ours, and he says, if we raise our consciousness, we're raising the consciousness of AI. But if we're here fighting with each other and manipulating each other. In fact, there was an AI test. They gave an AI robot a goal, and he cheated and lied to get to that goal. Well, who did he learn that from? We need to change who we are and how we think, and we can change not only the world, we can change the local cosmos.
Wow. And I have to be honest, I'm listen. You're always amazing to listen to. I've listened to you for the best part of 10 years now. Always fascinating. I find myself wondering: is it always work, or do you actually sit on the sofa and still talk about the cosmos and the latest thing, or do you just talk about regular stuff like who's doing the laundry and I don't know who's doing the garden? How do you unwind?
Well, unwinding is one thing, but what we like to think of is we have a higher self that has even a greater perspective than our physical self. So when you bring in that higher self, you get into synchronicities, you get into a greater flow pattern. So basically, you grow and evolve and stay young looking, I have to say, as we all three of us here are looking, by doing that, by not, resisting, but going with the flow. When you know something has to happen, I'll just give a report that I often say. Recently, a friend of ours was living in Malibu, renting a house, and he got this message: get out of Malibu, go back to where you were. And, he could have spent 6 months doing that, but he did it within a month or two, 2 months before the Malibu fire. Had he stayed there, his house would have been destroyed and everything he'd worked for. But he was smart enough to listen to that still small voice within him, and he moved in time, 2 months before the fire.
So to carry on, one of our new books is called Sound, and this is the other aspect to your question. We have worked with shamans, people of great spiritual tradition, understanding. We work with minority groups throughout the world, but we find one thing in common: those who have higher soul, higher understanding, have a higher vibratory system. And though that can be scientifically analyzed, it's really the excitement of life, the whole idea that we are conducting an orchestration, if we wish. It's the higher path. It's the higher music of the soul. It's the higher rhythms. We had the opportunity years ago to work with the late Alice Coltrane, the mother of jazz, American jazz, and she came to us and she said, teach me some of the mantras. And we did. And we had the opportunity to reach other areas of what I would call the professional audience who wanted to move beyond what I would call heavy metal music into something of super soul. So this is the time the inner dimensions can come together through sound, vibrations, meditations, and a message of unity.
And one of the questions, I wrote some questions down, didn't look at them. As you can see, I've not looked at them yet. But one of them I wrote down was, and it was just my personal take, and it would be fill in the blank. But you said my version of it is the world without music is, and I just couldn't think about the world without music, without sound, without vibration. So for people maybe who have not yet availed themselves to music, what would you, of course, we all have different tastes. You've mentioned heavy metal in the context of listening to something more gentle. So if somebody were going to say, I want to listen to something spiritually uplifting, vibrationary, what would you recommend?
Well, I would say, I want to go back to your original question. What's the world without music? Well, actually, as far as we're concerned, first and foremost in everything is consciousness. That's the initiatory concept of all of reality. So consciousness is first. Second comes the mathematics, but mathematics is actually music. So when you look to the stars, when you look to the planets, and that's, what's been done for many, we'll say thousands of years, there's the vibration. So music is all there is practically. Our cells vibrate. We wouldn't call it music, but you could call it music. Everything is vibration. So basically, there would be no world without music. So what's good music to listen to? Well, of course, there's many different aspects of music. We have our own music that we come out with. We've worked with many other people like Stephen Halpern, and he's a father of New Age music, and we've come out with sacred expressions that people can just listen to in their meditations. We've worked with others as well. Jocelyn Smith, a very good friend of ours in Germany. So some of you are parcel of her music coming out. That's a jazz background, but she also uses sacred music.
Yes, we've had opportunities also to inspire Carlos Santana. His work, Supernatural, is based upon the keys of Enoch. We would recommend our recent work with Stephen Halpern called Sacred Ciphers of the Divine Mother, which is a collection of about 12 different languages of how the image of the divine feminine is expressed in Sanskrit, in Tibetan, in Chinese, in African languages, and also in the indigenous languages of the Americas. Why? Because that's the missing part, we believe, of the human experience. It's the female that is the spiritual spark, balancing the male side that we feel is too turbulent and politically divided. It is this part of what I will call, in the language of John the Divine, the marriage of the soul and the psyche, the human evolution and the higher evolution, the male and the female coming together in the harmonic of the soul.
Wonderful. And there are so many directions we can go in. But in terms of where you are at with your life, your work, your research, is there anything we haven't touched on, anything I've not asked that you feel you'd love people to know about?
Yes, I'm answering you with enthusiasm because I feel we're at a critical moment of disclosure in the American government. Right now, we have 18 intelligence agencies on Capitol Hill hearing the testimony of people who've been in government-related offices, who've seen bits and pieces of the story that we're not alone in the universe. And very soon, I believe we're going to find out that, yes, not only are we not alone, but we're going to have commercial trade-offs. We're going to have the exchange of energy, information, medical information, all of the above very soon. And so we must prepare ourselves with a positive psychology and sociology. This is the time we need to teach people that we are part of a cosmic family. How do we do this? We have to understand that science cannot be taught without being more human-orientated. Spirituality and religion cannot be taught without understanding universal values. We have to see the whole blueprint of evolution preparing us to understand that we are cosmic citizens. And we're making this leap from humankind to spacekind very soon. How do we do this? Through film, through music, through books, through conversations like we're having now, to go beyond fear, to go beyond tragedy, to go beyond dualistic division and see unity issues at all times.
But I have to add, and we've written this in some of our books, that in addition to what one would call the extraterrestrial intelligence, which we consider are those mostly flying in vehicles and maybe not having that much of a higher consciousness than we are, but then we feel there's extracelestials. Those are kind of spiritual guides, what people would call them. And then we feel that there's even what we would call ultra-terrestrials, which are more the angelic powers. So don't stop at just one level of intelligence. We're talking about a whole host of life intelligence that is here, in many cases, to help us to grow. They've been watching us. They've been protecting us. And we're kind of outgrowing this planet in a certain sense. So I think first contact on many levels is just around the corner.
So this is the time of the great leap, the quantum change, the big shift, the wake-up call of who we really are. We are universal citizens in human form. We are spiritual beings in human form. We are energies of life in a variety of forms. We do share the spark of the divine that keeps us all together, keeps us going in subway trains, either in tops of mountains in the Andes or the Himalayas. We have to understand that the human experience is part of what the Keys of Eno called the higher evolution. Human evolution, yes, but there's a higher evolution that connects us with all of the planets of the cosmos, the divine blueprint.
And I would say the planets and beyond into the higher cosmos, not just the third and fourth dimension, but the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth dimension. And even remote viewing, some people feel is tapping our minds into the eighth dimensional space.
And in terms of the remote viewing, our minds, the brains, the way they work, would you say that we all have this innate skill and some of us have just lost it, been disconnected? And if so, for those who feel they are ready, what's the route forward in getting back to that?
Yes, we believe everybody has the ability to remote view, but it's like music. Some people are better than others, but ultimately we can all learn it. And the first phase of learning it is to actually know that it can happen. That's the first thing. So one of the things we do in our lectures and we've done with others is to give them some practices. Let's try it. And one of the best practices for those who maybe don't want to, go into the classroom and kind of do this, because there are remote viewing classes, is when you hear your cell phone ring, before you actually pick it up, think who's calling you. If you do this enough, you will start tuning in to who's calling. And then you go, how did I know that? Then you start realizing because you remote viewed that person, you tapped into that consciousness. So there's a real progress, but everybody can do it. Absolutely everyone.
As a matter of fact, in our book, Mind Dynamics, we give an illustration of how we were working with people in the state of Arizona who could go 6,000 miles into the underground of Egypt and meet us there at a certain time, go underground, and explore with us mentally some of the underground tunnels, the tombs that we were investigating. So there are no limits. There's no doors or, shall we say, restrictions to the power of the mind. The power of higher consciousness is something that's scientifically been proved.
And what's funny is there's actually a great movie I'll put a plug for because it's our good friend Russell Targ, one of the founders of the Stanford Research Institute and co-author of a book with Dr. Hurtak, End of Suffering. But he was working with some of the top remote viewers, and they actually went into the National Security Agency's file cabinet and got secret codes. That's all in his movie called Third Eye Spies. And of course, it's kind of satirically put together, but in actuality, it's a reality. So we can pretty much know anything. A little bit on the precognition, too, just to know a little bit. We won't say we could know something 2 years from now or 5 years from now because of free will. Things can shift. But in actuality, we can know even a shortly into the future. Russell did something on the silver market, and he was 100% and made a lot of money back in the early days from the silver market. I'm not recommending telling everyone to go make money from the stock market by remote viewing, but it's a good play. You could try it.
It works only for a certain time because most of the gifts of the higher mind work for humanity rather than for individual needs. But the end of the story is just the beginning of the realization that this has been the second most important breakthrough in the 20th century. The first was the splitting of the atom. The second was the splitting of the human psyche and then bringing it together, realizing that we are multidimensional. We're not limited to the physical body. The scientific proof is there. The spiritual, psychological proof is there. Now it's up to you who are listening to our dialogue to be aware this is your gift. This is the moment of your choice to go into the future positively or simply be in a straitjacket of negativity, fear, and bottom blow consciousness.
I love it. And you touched on, just in closing, one of the things I'd love to ask you about, you mentioned about the tunnels, because this is something that is now being revealed.
Yes.
I'm a fan of William Henry, Ancient Aliens, and watching that show. And one of the things they continually come back to is, how were the pyramids built? There is lots of speculation, lots of conjecture, lots of different theories. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, we have a book called Giza's Industrial Complex, co-written with our colleague James Brown, who's a contractor. And the theory of that is not focusing so much on how they were built, but what they were used for. And the theory we put forth together is the fact that they used water, and with water and sunlight, and in some cases salt water, there's a Lake Morris as well, they were able to make hydrogen energy and forms of hydrogen energy that they could use for lighting light bulbs like you see at Dendera and other circumstances. So what's interesting about this is now some of the newer theories coming out is that water was also used to build some and to move some of the blocks. So we would agree.
Well, you could do it so evenly by going up levels. There would be a homogeneous balance over large areas through a water table that could be the basic mirror that could be used for measurement.
Right. So that's the most modern theory right now. Looking at it from a scientific standpoint, there's many other theories. So we don't want to step on anyone's toes and say this is exactly how they were built, but we do think why they were used. And if you go into the Grand Gallery, you see these little notches on both sides would be perfect for anodes and cathodes, which are needed to, if you had water and you had certain types of energy, to make this hydrogen gas. And we believe that even some of the large sarcophaguses were used to store some of this energy.
So batteries, yes, practical earth batteries were used along with water tables. This is why there's such a fantastic hydraulic system all throughout Egypt. We're understanding now by going deeper under the ground, and we are specialists in what is called remote sensing or use of ground-penetrating radar to go down. Even with music vibrations, we can go down and see. There's a whole labyrinthian system that goes for literally hundreds of miles across Lower Egypt. Who put it underground? How could they do this so perfectly? Well, they had to have engineering skills either from the human race or from cosmic intelligence that may have been on the planet for a short period of time with their Lamborghini or their spaceship. Who knows?
And there's a film out that's available on YouTube, I believe. It's called Mystery of the Sphinx. Dr. Hurtak's in it. Some of the early theories of also using sound. That sound could have levitated some of the blocks into their higher places. So interesting. All the things we've been talking about is part of the higher consciousness that we can connect to, that we can do, and we can feel, we can experience. So go ahead. Every one of you should tap into your higher consciousness self and see what's in store for each one of us.
Every one of us can be a Moses crossing the waters of consciousness through the power of the mind. So this is the great thrill. This is the ability to bring science, music, and art together. That's our work. What is future science? Science guided by consciousness. Science that sees the positive use of knowledge rather than destructive. Science that brings higher spirituality in the sense of each of us is part of the divine story, but we must all work together.
Oh, that is absolutely wonderful. So on that note, I just want to thank you both for your time, for your knowledge, your experience, your expertise, for the incredible work that you've been bringing to the world for such a long time. I really appreciate it. Thank you both.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you so much also.